For decades, Roy Rogers was America's cowboy. He was the face of the American West, the man in the white hat who stood for honesty, kindness, and family values. Millions watched his movies, listened to his music, and welcomed him into their homes every week. To the public, his life seemed almost perfect. But behind the legend was a deeply personal family story that remained hidden for years. Then, nearly 3 decades after his death, one of his daughters finally confirmed a truth that changed how many people viewed the iconic star. And once you hear it, you may never think about Roy Rogers the same way again. Before we get to that revelation, it helps to understand just how extraordinary Roy Rogers' rise really was. Born Leonard Franklin Sly in Cincinnati, Ohio, on November 5, 1911, he came from humble beginnings. There was nothing in his early life that suggested he would become one of the most famous entertainers in America. He wasn't born into wealth. He had no Hollywood connections. What he did have was determination, a guitar, and a talent for music. During the Great Depression, he moved to California and worked as a migrant fruit picker in the San Joaquin Valley. After long days in the fields, he would sit around campfires and play music for fellow workers. He quickly realized that songs could lift people's spirits in difficult times. That simple discovery would shape the rest of his life. But nobody could have imagined where it would lead. Rogers eventually joined a musical group called the Pioneer Trio, which later became the Sons of the Pioneers. Their hit song Tumbling Tumbleweeds caught Hollywood's attention and opened doors that had previously seemed impossible. Republic Pictures signed him in 1937 and gave him a new stage name, Roy Rogers. The choice proved brilliant. Audiences connected with him immediately. What followed was one of the most successful careers in entertainment history. Beginning in 1943, Roy Rogers was named the #1 money-making Western star for 12 straight years. He starred in dozens of films alongside his famous horse Trigger, his loyal dog Bullet, and his Jeep Nellie Bell. These weren't just characters. They became part of American culture. Children across the country dreamed of joining Roy on his adventures. His success extended far beyond movies. The Roy Rogers Show became a television sensation. His music career flourished. He remains the only person inducted twice into the Country Music Hall of Fame, once as a member of the Sons of the Pioneers and again as an individual performer. His signature song, Happy Trails, became one of the most recognizable tunes in American history. To the public, Roy Rogers seemed larger than life. But behind the scenes, he was carrying burdens few people ever knew about. And that's where another important figure enters the story, Dale Evans. You can't tell Roy Rogers' story without talking about Dale. Together, they became one of the most beloved couples in entertainment history. Their chemistry was obvious from the moment they appeared together on screen. But their connection went much deeper than that. They shared values, faith, and a vision for the kind of family they wanted to build. Dale Evans, born Frances Octavia Smith in Texas, had experienced her own hardships long before meeting Roy. Her early life was complicated, and she carried painful secrets from her past. Yet when she and Roy began working together in the 1940s, they formed a bond that would last for more than 50 years. After the death of Roy's first wife, Arlene, in 1946, he married Dale on New Year's Eve in 1947. Some people thought the marriage happened too quickly. Instead, it became one of Hollywood's most enduring love stories. They remained together until Roy's death nearly half a century later. Their strong Christian faith guided much of their lives. They often spoke publicly about their beliefs and participated in religious events across the country. That faith would soon face its greatest test. Because despite all their success, tragedy was waiting just around the corner. In 1950, Roy and Dale welcomed a daughter named Robin Elizabeth Rogers. She was their only biological child together. From the moment she was born, they adored her. But doctors quickly delivered devastating news. Robin had Down syndrome. Today, people have a much better understanding of Down syndrome. In 1950, however, attitudes were very different. Many doctors routinely advised parents to place children with disabilities in institutions and keep them hidden from public view. That was considered normal at the time. Roy and Dale refused. Despite pressure from medical professionals and concerns from Hollywood executives, they chose to raise Robin openly and proudly. They insisted she appear in family photographs. They refused to hide her from the public. At a time when many families were encouraged to conceal children with disabilities, Roy and Dale took a stand that was remarkably courageous. But then the unthinkable happened. Robin died in August 1952, just weeks before her second birthday. Complications from mumps took her life. The loss shattered her parents. No amount of fame, success, or faith could erase that pain. What happened next surprised many people. Instead of withdrawing from the world, Dale turned her grief into something meaningful. She wrote a book called Angel Unaware, told from Robin's perspective as if her daughter was speaking from heaven. The book became a bestseller and offered comfort to countless families raising children with disabilities. At a time when society often treated those children as invisible, Dale's words helped change perceptions and encouraged acceptance. Robin's short life left a lasting impact far beyond her family. But according to a revelation that would come decades later, her influence extended even further than anyone realized. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. In 1954, a 13-year-old girl from Scotland arrived in America and became part of the Rogers family. Her name was Marion Mimi Rogers. Unlike Roy and Dale's glamorous Hollywood life, Mimi's childhood had been marked by hardship. She spent much of her early life in an orphanage during and after World War II. She had experienced uncertainty, loneliness, and the absence of a permanent family. Then everything changed when Roy and Dale adopted her. Imagine the adjustment. One day she was a young girl growing up in a Scottish orphanage. The next, she was the daughter of America's most famous cowboy. But what Mimi remembers most isn't the fame. Years later, she explained that inside the house, Roy and Dale were simply mom and dad. The celebrity image disappeared at home. What mattered was love, stability, and family. Then came the revelation that stunned many people. Mimi said she believed the reason Roy and Dale adopted her was directly connected to Robin's death. The loss of their daughter had created an empty space in their hearts. Rather than closing themselves off, they chose to open their home to children who needed families. Mimi has spoken openly about this connection. She has said that she likely owes her entire life in America to Robin, the little girl she never met. Think about that for a moment. Robin lived less than 2 years. Yet the ripple effects of her life reached across an ocean and transformed the future of a child growing up in a Scottish orphanage. It's an extraordinary idea. Robin never knew Mimi. Mimi never knew Robin. Yet their lives became forever linked. And the story didn't end there. Roy and Dale continued adopting children. They welcomed Dodie, Sandy, Debbie, and others into their growing family. Together, they built a household that included children from different backgrounds and cultures. In an era when such families were uncommon, the Rogers home became something remarkable. But even then, tragedy was not finished with them. Over the years, the family endured more heartbreaking losses. Their adopted daughter Debbie died in a bus accident at just 12 years old. Only a year later, their adopted son Sandy died while serving in the military in Germany after a night of heavy drinking. 3 children. 3 devastating losses. Most people can barely imagine losing one child. Roy and Dale buried 3. Yet they continued moving forward. They remained devoted to their family. They maintained their public careers. They continued speaking about hope, faith, and perseverance. The smiling faces Americans saw on television were supported by a private strength forged through unimaginable grief. And that's what makes this story so powerful. The Roy Rogers people thought they knew was the cheerful cowboy riding into the sunset. The Roy Rogers his family knew was a father who experienced profound heartbreak and responded with compassion instead of bitterness. When Roy died in 1996 at the age of 86, tributes poured in from across the country. Fans mourned. Political leaders offered condolences. His legacy as an entertainer seemed secure. But as years passed, much of the family's deeper story faded from public memory. Then Mimi spoke. She confirmed what had long remained a private truth. Robin's death became the catalyst for the adoptions that followed. The little girl Roy and Dale lost helped inspire them to open their hearts to children who desperately needed a home. That revelation changes the way many people view Roy Rogers. Not because it destroys the legend, because it makes it more meaningful. The image of Roy Rogers as a good man was never a myth, but the fuller story reveals something even more powerful. It shows a man and a woman who transformed grief into generosity. They could have allowed tragedy to harden them. Instead, they used it as a reason to love more people. Mimi's words may be the clearest description of who Roy Rogers really was. Not the movie star. Not the cowboy. Not the icon. A father. A man who welcomed a frightened 13-year-old girl from Scotland into his family and gave her a future she never imagined possible. That is the story Mimi confirmed. A story connecting the daughter Roy and Dale lost to the daughter they brought home from across the ocean. Robin's life was brief, but its impact stretched far beyond her years. Through the love her parents had for her, countless lives were changed. Roy Rogers died many years ago. Yet stories like this remind us why some people are never truly gone. Long after the fame fades and the spotlight disappears, the truth about who they were continues to surface. And sometimes, that truth turns out to be even more remarkable than the legend itself.